It all began with what seemed like an ordinary family dispute, but no one could have imagined it would spiral into a battle so fierce, so relentless, that it would end up in the highest court of the land. At the center of this story was a child, innocent, unaware, caught between two parents whose love had turned into a war. This wasn't just a legal fight, it was an emotional war, one that tested loyalty, truth, and even morality. Before we go further, make sure to subscribe to our channel, because here we bring you the most gripping real stories that carry lessons far beyond the surface. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. It started like many custody disputes do: a separation, bitterness between two parents, and a tug-of-war over who deserved the child's love and trust. The mother claimed she was the true caregiver, the one who had raised the child day and night. The father insisted he had the stability, the resources, and the discipline to provide the better home. Both sides had lawyers. Both sides had witnesses. But beneath the polished arguments were raw emotions: fear, anger, desperation. What made this case different was not just the bitterness, but the secrets that began to surface: hidden financial records, questionable friends, accusations of neglect, and even rumors of manipulation, all came spilling out in court. The local judge struggled to make sense of the evidence. Each hearing grew more complicated, with both parents fighting harder, as though winning the child's custody meant winning their entire dignity. But in truth, the one losing the most was the child. As months turned into years, the case refused to die. Appeals were filed. Judges recused themselves. Media caught wind of the drama, painting both parents as villains and victims depending on the headline of the day. People in the community whispered about it. Neighbors took sides, and even distant relatives were dragged into the storm. The child became a symbol of the fight, rather than a person, a pawn in a battle no child should ever have to endure. The father's side argued that the mother was too unstable, unfit to provide a healthy environment. The mother's side countered with claims that the father was controlling, too strict, and emotionally harmful. It wasn't just about who was telling the truth. It was about which truth the court would choose to believe. By now, both parents had drained nearly everything they had: savings, energy, reputations, and still, neither side was willing to give up. The stakes had grown beyond one child's custody. It was about pride, justice, and the fear of losing everything. The case climbed higher and higher through the legal system until at last it reached the Supreme Court. And that's where the story took a turn no one saw coming. When the case finally reached the Supreme Court, the tension was unlike anything seen before. It was no longer just about a mother and a father fighting for custody. It had become a test case that would set a precedent for future family disputes across the nation. Cameras swarmed the courthouse steps, reporters shouted questions, and the public waited to see who would emerge victorious. But for the child at the center of it all, victory didn't mean one parent winning over the other. It meant peace, something still far out of reach. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. Lawyers presented carefully crafted arguments, supported by years of documents, testimonies, and emotional pleas. The father's team leaned heavily on stability, financial security, structured routines, and a home environment that promised order. The mother's team emphasized love, emotional connection, and the years of nurturing she had already given to the child. Judges listened silently, weighing not only the evidence, but also the broader implications of their ruling. But soon, hidden truths began to unravel. Records surfaced showing the father had at times been absent during key moments in the child's life, prioritizing work and personal ambitions. On the other hand, evidence emerged that the mother had made questionable choices in her personal relationships, creating doubts about the safety of the environment she could provide. The courtroom became a stage where every detail of their private lives was exposed for the world to judge. What shocked everyone most was a testimony from the child. For the first time, the child's voice was heard in court. Nervous, fragile, yet clear. The child spoke not about money or stability, but about love, safety, and fear. That testimony pierced the hearts of everyone present, reminding them that beneath the arguments and legal jargon, a young soul was crying for normalcy, for care, for a place to feel safe. The judges didn't respond immediately. They sat in silence, their faces revealing nothing, but inside, they were wrestling with a question bigger than law. How do you balance justice with compassion? Outside, the case had sparked debates across the country. Talk shows, opinion pieces, and community forums buzzed with arguments over parental rights, the role of the state in family disputes, and the meaning of a child's best interest. Some believed the father's structured approach was the right path. Others felt the mother's emotional bond outweighed everything. But everyone agreed on one thing. This case was no longer just about one family. It had become a mirror reflecting society's struggle to define what truly makes a parent fit. As the hearings continued, the battle grew more intense. Each side brought out deeper secrets, desperate to prove themselves worthy. It was no longer about compromise, it was about absolute victory. The Supreme Court was left with an impossible decision. And as the final day of arguments approached, the tension reached its breaking point. What the judges would decide next would not only change one child's life forever, but also set a standard for generations to come. The final day in the Supreme Court arrived, and with it came an overwhelming sense of anticipation. Families, reporters, and legal experts filled the seats. It wasn't just a case anymore, it was a spectacle. Every word spoken, every gesture made, was documented and analyzed. The parents, once partners in love, now sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, their faces tense, their eyes filled with exhaustion. Years of conflict had led to this single moment, where everything hung in the balance. The father's lawyer stood first, painting him as the stable force the child needed. He emphasized the father's financial security, his ability to provide education, healthcare, and a disciplined environment. He portrayed him as the responsible adult who could shield the child from chaos. But his words, though polished, lacked warmth. They were facts, numbers, and promises that felt more like contracts than love. Next came the mother's lawyer. Her argument wasn't about money, it was about connection. She reminded the court of the countless nights the mother stayed awake by her child's bedside, the laughter they shared, the comfort of a parent who knew every detail of their child's heart. She argued that love could not be measured in bank statements or schedules, and as she spoke, tears welled up in the mother's eyes, her trembling hands betraying the pain of possibly losing everything. But then something unexpected happened. A letter was introduced into evidence. Written by the child, it had been sealed until now, at the request of the child's counselor. The judges opened it carefully, reading the words silently, while the entire courtroom waited in breathless silence. In simple handwriting, the child had written about fear of being caught in the middle, about wanting both parents, but not their endless fighting. "I just want peace," the letter said. "I want to feel safe and loved. I don't want to be the reason they hate each other." The courtroom fell silent. No lawyer could argue against that letter. No amount of legal strategy could outshine the raw truth of a child's plea. Both parents wept quietly, their armor of anger beginning to crack. For the first time in years, they weren't fighting each other. They were facing the pain they had caused their own child. The judges recessed to deliberate. Hours felt like days as the parents sat in separate rooms, consumed by anxiety. Outside, the media speculated endlessly, but inside those walls, the decision weighed heavily. Should custody go to one parent entirely? Should it be shared? Could either parent truly provide the peace the child was begging for? By the time the judges returned, the air was thick with tension. Everyone rose as they entered, their faces still unreadable. The head justice cleared his throat, preparing to deliver words that would not only decide the fate of one family, but also shape how future courts would handle custody battles of this magnitude. The world leaned in, ready to hear the verdict. The head justice began to speak, and his words carried the weight of history. He acknowledged that this case had gone beyond the typical custody dispute. It was a mirror reflecting the pain of broken families everywhere. He spoke about the child's letter, the courage it took to write it, and how its simple truth outweighed all the complex arguments laid before the court. The decision was clear. Custody would not be awarded as a prize to one parent over the other. Instead, the court ruled for a shared custody arrangement, one that prioritized the child's well-being above all else. But it came with conditions. Both parents were required to undergo counseling, not just individually, but together. The court insisted they learn how to communicate, not for themselves, but for their child. The message was firm. Love was not enough if it came with conflict. Peace and cooperation were the true guardians of a child's future. As the ruling was read, tears streamed down the mother's face. The father sat in silence, his jaw tight. But even he couldn't hide the relief that flickered across his expression. The courtroom wasn't filled with cheers or gasps. It was filled with an almost sacred stillness. Everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. When the parents walked out of the courtroom for the first time in years, they looked at each other, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as two people bound forever by the life they had brought into this world. The media rushed forward, microphones and cameras flashing, but the parents said nothing. They didn't need to. Their silence spoke volumes. The battle was over, and now the real work of healing could begin. The story of this custody case spread worldwide, not just because it reached the Supreme Court, but because it carried a lesson. Families, lawyers, and judges alike reflected on the truth that came from the child's voice. In the end, it wasn't the arguments or the evidence that decided the case. It was the heart of a child asking for peace. That truth resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. And maybe that's the message for all of us. Sometimes in life, we fight battles so fiercely that we forget what truly matters. We hold on to anger, pride, or the need to win. But in the process, we lose sight of the innocent hearts caught in the middle. This case reminds us that winning isn't everything. Healing is. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most emotional court cases ever seen. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more daily videos filled with stories that not only shock but also inspire. Remember, life isn't about the battles you win, but about the peace you create. Stay strong, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.